Hey guys, this is Kim Guy. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. Strap yourselves in, we have a large amount of cards to talk about this time. We are on to Vivid Voltage as the main set here, but this is a weird time as far as the TCG goes. There's actually a couple of side sets that come up around this as well. None of them introduce too many brand new cards. There's only like 80 odd cards in this one anyway. But yeah, we have Champion's Path that was just after Worlds in Darkness Ablaze, and then we have the Shining Fates set that comes out just after Vivid Voltage, but before Battle Styles. And this one, as you would imagine from being a Fate set here, is largely a reprint thing of a ton of the cards that we have just in shiny form now. So these are kind of neat, once again from like a collector's perspective. Visually I don't think they look super good, but it's neat to have different copies of them around. There's some like nice full art prints of things in here as well that are just cool to have. And yeah, realistically, there's only a few new cards in here, so normally we would split these up a bit, but realistically there's so little that's worth playing at the moment or feels good to play that we just want to have as many options as possible here before we get to Battle Styles, and that's actually a good set. So yeah, there's as there is a ton of stuff to talk about, we do have the interest pool over here. It's actually quite a lot of cards. What I will say for Vivid Voltage is that it has a fair amount of interesting cards, even if most of them aren't very good and basically none of them are meta at the moment. There's a couple of new decks that come out from it, but they have some pretty hard unfavorable matchups as well. And quite a few of these do end up seeing play deep into the future rather than play just now. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of cards that are worth noting, I suppose. So yeah, it's kind of fun, if nothing else, unlike Darkness Ablaze, which had basically nothing that was worth it, right? One of the things that get introduced here, and I think it's only these two sets, we have amazing rare Pokemon, such as, let me find a good example, there's the Zamazenta down here, there we go, that'll do. These are basic Pokemon, they're all like legendaries and stuff like that for the most part, and they have really expensive attacks, let's just put it that way. They have crazy color requirements, all of them taking 2 or 3 different energy, sometimes between their attacks. I think there's a Celebi that takes like 2 for one of its attacks and 1 for the other of a different type. They're kind of like crystal types in a way, but instead of just really being terrible, they just have expensive like to pay attacks here. Like, how are you getting a Metala fighting and a lightning energy on the same dude, right? These don't see play at the moment, but they're still, some of them are still worth noting because they see a lot of play in Lost Box decks near the end of the era. So we will still go over them, and there is one which saw some play. Todd actually mentioned it pretty recently in EUIC at the time of recording, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, we'll go over them as we do, because there are actually some noteworthy ones here. Just they are basically impossible to play at the moment, so don't expect to see them until we get to Lost Origin. So with that all said, we actually have some promo stuff this time as well. I think I have the Surfetched in here, I do, so we don't really need to mention that one. There's a new Hatena, which has got Find a Friend, I guess is kind of cool, but the Hatterines are all pretty bad, so nobody really cares. And then there's just a really cool alternate art for the Charmander in this set. We still have the Collect and Flare from this particular one, so it's not like a different card to the one that you see up here, but it's a cool artwork, so I'm going to note it anyway. We've had so few promos that are actually different in, or worth talking about in the last few sets, that I just wanted to note them anyway. So let's go over the trainers first, as we usually do. This is accumulated between all 3 sets, but most of the stuff that's worth talking about is all here, so let's do that. Moo Moo Cheese is not something I would normally speak about, but is very dumb in a couple of specific decks that in the future. It heals 30 from 2 different Pokemon that have energy attached to them. So it's neat, it's just a potion, but technically it's 2 potions, so kinda cool. There's a couple of decks that have like 1 energy but have recoil style attacks, or like trapping style things where the opponent takes damage if they hit you, and you can play it in there, so yeah. Rotom Phone, really good with a Colossal from this set, we'll get into that later on. You look at the top 5 of your deck, choose one of them to put on top of the deck, and the rest of them get shuffled in before you top deck that card. It's neat, it's a good dig tool to allow you to get a bit further into the deck, works very well with the Oranguru to swap one of the cards in your hand with that card that you picked out, so that's very nice, and the Colossal requires you to have an energy on top of the deck for it to get any real use out of this set. So it does work very well with that as well, being able to put one on top of the deck. Mew VMAX uses this later on as well because the Genesect engine is busted, but anything that you use to just raw draw cards is also pretty good with this. So like even, it would have been like Acrobike, right, before that rotated, but even Judge Whistle would be pretty funny with this. Could do some turbo stuff with that. Suspicious Food Tin never sees play, but this is a heal 80 from a Pokemon with a Psychic Energy attached to it. You then discard that Psychic Energy. It was supposed to work with the Gardevoir VMAX from the Champion's Path set, but that card is god-awful, I'm afraid. So, yeah, it's like 180 for free energy, heal 50 from it or something. It's not even that good as a tank card. So, yeah, there's no acceleration with this anymore. It would have been pretty cool for Malamar VMAX, like Malamar in a Psychic VMAX deck, but that doesn't exist, so unfortunate. Team Yeltal is something I think Blissey decks played later on. It heals 50 from both active Pokemon, but if the opponent doesn't have any damage on them, they don't get healed, obviously. So, yeah, it's like Great Potion. Sometimes it sees play here and there. The ball guy is very silly. It's got a really cool full art, actually, but you search your deck for up to 3 different items with the word ball in their name. Yeah, so you can't get Balloonberry as a thing. That was always the fun one we tried to note before. We don't quite have enough ball search options in this format at the moment because we did lose a few of them to rotation, but we do get Level Ball and Ultra Ball later on, so you could technically play this way down the line if you want to. 3 different ones is kind of funky. If we only had stuff like Timer Ball and things available, then this would be a lot better. But I don't know, like Great Ball is still a card you could play, I suppose. B is a version of End's Resolve, I suppose, which can technically go to multiple Pokemon this time. You discard the top 5 cards of your deck, and any energy of any kind that you find there get attached to your benched fighting type Pokemon however you want. If only you could like multiple stack the top cards of your deck, this would be pretty useful, but realistically you're not going to hit very much off of this. This sort of thing is best on an item card, to be fair, although obviously special energy can get attached, and maybe that's why you would consider it. Leon lets you do 30 more damage with your actives attack to the opponent's active Pokemon. So, yeah, triple plus power. We have seen this kind of thing see play in the past. I mean, Iris was like a tech card, but it could be searched at the time, so that was kind of good. But think of stuff like Giovanni's Scheme was actually played. Yeah, it had a draw part to it, but the draw was pretty weak, so it was mostly the plus 20. I think Professor Kukui especially was also very good that way. So, it doesn't draw cards, so you do have to have some sort of other engine around it. There is, of course, his Charizard deck that you can play in as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. Pretty solid though, and Eldegoss can recover it, so discarding it's not a huge problem either. Good stuff. NASA lets you put 4 in any combination of water Pokemon and energy cards from your discard pile back into the hand. So it's good recovery, it immediately gets into hand as well, so that's why you would play this over Ordinary Rod, and it can get 4 water if you want to as well. Like, Frostmoth can only attach to the bench, but it can still accelerate all of those energy, so pretty good card for that. Has its own deck in this one. I won't really talk about it because the cards aren't good enough, but there's Cramorant in this set that lets you discard Arrokuda from your bench to do like 60 damage per one, and the Ness is supposed to recover the Arrokuda so that you can keep doing that. Not really strong enough though. Opal flips 2 coins, and for each head you get a card out of your deck. Computer search on a coin toss thing. People apparently played Skylar, and Pepper was pointing out this is probably better than Skylar. Obviously the double tails thing would be devastating, but yeah, you could effectively read this as like 75% of the time get a Skylar, 25% of the time do nothing though. But hey, I mean, you might not need a trainer card, you might need a Pokemon or an energy, right? So there's some potential use for it, but I think it's too luck reliant for most people. Stadium cards, we get Sir Chester Bath in here. Basic Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks. kind of annoying, to be honest. It's not really the sort of stadium that does a lot, but there are, you know, like, basics don't need this kind of help sort of situation. Maybe they do in this format though, because VMAX is, right? This does allow tag teams to take 20 less damage as well, which is kind of annoying, to be honest. Wind and Stadium is a good VMAX tool if you are in a tanking sort of VMAX deck. If you evolve a Pokemon V into a VMAX, you heal 100 from that Pokemon. There is a supporter card I'm not gonna like give more than an honorable mention in this set that draws 2, but if this card is in play you draw 4. This card's not strong enough to justify it though. And then the tool cards, there's quite a few of them between the sets here. Hero's Medal lets you Island Challenge Amulet, a VMAX. It gives it 100 less HP, but if it gets KO'd by damage, then from the opponent's Pokemon specifically, not from your own recoil, they take 1 fewer prize card for it. So this could be used with Eternatus, where you end up with like a 240 HP one, but it's still doing crazy amounts of damage. It only gives up 2 prizes, so you've still got to go through 2 more Eternatus VMAX as well. I don't really think it's good enough, but it did see some experimentation, so there you go. Memory Capsule is the tool equivalent of the Memory Energy that we had before, or the Shrine of Memories. It lets you use pre-evolution attacks. There is actually specific synergy with the evolutions in this set that we'll talk about as far as abilities go, but yeah, it's kind of neat. There's just not usually a ton of attacks that are worth using on pre-evolutions. They don't seem to print good attacks on them ever, so yeah, there's very little actual use for this unfortunately, but if something comes up, you know it's going to be played. One consideration could be the Salamence VMAX actually, to use Swoop Across on from the V, but that has a better tool we'll talk about in a sec. Rocky Helmet gets a reprint in here with all of the massive damage, these massive HP totals these VMAXs have. Maybe you could use it. I don't think it's worth it, but it's there at the very least. And then we have a Zamazenta and a Zacian specific tool cards here as well, because of course they needed buffs. I mean, Zamazenta's not that great, but Zacian, yeah, sure. Give it a triple plus power tool, why not, right? We just lost Metal Frying Pan, so I suppose, yeah, make this hit like 290 after ADP does its thing. Yeah, that was totally necessary, right? Zamazenta's one lets you gain 70 extra HP, so that puts it at 300 in total, which is pretty good for a 2-prizer, let's not get it twisted. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, VMAXs are a lot of the meta at the moment, and Zamazenta does get to nullify damage by VMAXs with its ability, so who knows, right? And then finally, for the tools, we have Telescopic Sight. This one lets you do 30 more damage with your snipe attacks to the opponent's V and GX bench Pokemon. So I could have waited for this set to play the Salamence, and maybe I still would, but I'm not going to bring the same deck twice in a row. This would let you snipe 70 to 2 of the opponent's bench V or GX Pokemon using the Salamence's first attack. That's kind of cool. Also, any attack that spreads like 30 to everything or 20 to everything on the bench, now suddenly you're spreading 50, 60, sort of that type of damage is pretty strong. So yeah, if you have the right tools for it, the right like deck type. So pretty strong card. Special Energy also gets seen here as well. Aromatic Grass Energy is really bad, but it does get seen in the grass decks of the time, simply because Eternatus was moving to a poison inflicting build in this set, where it uses like the Slowbro from the previous set, or Garbodor or something like that, to inflict poison on the opponent's active. This Grass Energy basically just prevents grass Pokemon from being affected by special conditions. It isn't great, but it's good enough for that deck, I suppose. There's a couple of grass decks that are interesting in this set, so we can talk about those as well. Coding Metal Energy just prevents weakness, so we just lost the Metal Frying Pans, then we have the Special Energy that does it. You can't Metal Saucer this though, so it does mess with your energy counts a fair bit there. I don't think it sees much play as a result. Stone Fighting Energy is pretty good. This makes your fighting Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks. So it's a defender on an energy this time. So yeah, fighting types are not doing the extra damage, that's what the colorless type is doing this time round. They're taking less instead, which is pretty good. Colossal can accelerate this, so it's quite nice. And then Wash Water is just a better aromatic energy most of the time. It's Mist Energy from the current era. Prevents all effects of attacks except damage done to the Pokemon this is attached to. Obviously water only, Frostmoth can't accelerate it, Capacious Bucket can't search it, but it is good enough to play 1 or 2 copies of in formats where like paralysis-based attacks and stuff are prevalent. So yeah. On to the Pokemon. They're in Dex order, of course. We have the Charizard as the mainstay here. This is Leonzard, the single prize Charizard here. 170 HP is pretty big. Like, there are some attacks that will tank, which is pretty good. Its ability looks at the top 3 cards of your deck, puts 1 to the hand, discards the others. I think the last time, I don't remember the last time we saw this, but I remember it most on Infernape level X, which is pretty funny. For 2 fire energy, which is just 1 welder, it's kind of neat. 100 damage, but it does 50 more for each Leon in the discard pile. This obviously maxes at 300 if all 4 Leon are in the discard, which is pretty good. If you play a Leon for turn, then it does 80 extra for that one, right? Because it's doing basically plus 30 and the Leon is in the discard, so it does more with that too. Pretty solid. Considering you're often going to discard Leons with its battle sense, that's pretty nice. There's a promo Pikachu V as well as the one from the set here. This one's got Circle Circuit, so I thought I'd mention it anyway. 30 for each of your bench Pokemon. Takes 2 lightning though, and we did lose a fair bit of good lightning acceleration, so I don't know. But 150, it's fine enough, right, when it evolves, so there is that. The other Pikachu V does get to search your deck for 2 lightning energy and attach them to itself, but the problem is it's a 190 HP guy that just like dies next turn most of the time, right? They're both low HP obviously, but yeah, I don't like these sorts of attacks that accelerate to themselves because they're just putting the fire in line and it's pretty bad. The free energy point is actually noteworthy though, not just for the Thunderbolt from missing, but for the Pikachu VMAX as well. Gmax Volt Tackle goes up to 310 HP too, which is a bit bulkier than its peers in like Eevee, Meowth, etc. Even bulkier than Morpeko. How about that? For free lightning energy, you only do 120 damage, which is really bad when we've lost all the damage mods for lightning. But if you discard all energy on this Pokemon, you do 270 instead, which is still not enough, to be fair. It's pretty good at taking out tag teams and such, but yeah, without Electro Power, this doesn't actually do very much. I think Japan probably had this earlier than we did and didn't do the rotation at the same time, so it made more sense for them. I don't think it's very good though. You could play it with Pikarom, but I think Pikarom's also not intensely good right now, so yeah. The Shining Fate set gave us Crobat VMAX to go with the V that we had before. This very, very rarely sees play and is less bulky than the Pikachu, how about that? But I want to note it specifically because of most decks playing Crobat V anyway. If you can accelerate Dark Energy later on when Mew VMAX is in the thing, or maybe Calyrex if you're worried about Shadow Rider, then you have an option that can one-shot Dark Weak Pokemon. Max Color is just a flat 180 for free energy. It's fine, right? Because it means you don't have to play like a separate thing like Malamar would, so maybe consider it with Arceus later on, I don't know. Galarian Sirfetch'd is pretty good with the Colossal from this set. It's a 210 HP 2 prizer, so it doesn't suffer from the VMAXing like before. Meteor Smash does 200 for 2 Fighting and a Colorless, which is enough to one-shot Eternatus, and the Pikarom deck still going around. You can't use that attack next turn, but that's fine, you can switch out anyway. The main thing this does well is that it lets you move Fighting Energy from your other Pokemon to itself when you move it from the bench to the active. So you can absorb energy from a soon-to-be KO'd Colossal and do a high amount of damage to go alongside it. Pretty good card overall. Electrode is another one of these explode, give up prizes, and do acceleration stuff. This lets you search for 2 lightning energy, attach them to your lightning Pokemon in any way that you like. It only gives up 1 prize, which is kind of neat. Maybe with Level Ball, you could see it played in the next set. Problem is, the next set is all about fighting types, so it probably isn't very good there. Coughing is worth noting because even though it's got less HP than before, this is the one that has Ascension, so if you go second you could use this to evolve into Galarian Wheezing and make it so the opponent can't have abilities in play, or the other Wheezing is still in format, so you could damage basic Pokemon in between turns as well. So yeah, this is quite a solid thing to have around. Galarian Wheezing doesn't see too much play until Boost Shake comes into play, but it did win regionals, I'm pretty sure, with Eternatus later on, so good stuff. Ditto V is one of the funniest artworks from the regular V stuff here. Love this one, just bring it on, right? This does Ditto things. It lets you transform it into a basic V from your discard pile. All of the turn effects and everything are still there, so I mean you can evolve if this has been in play for a turn. Can be quite good if you are relying on going into a VMAX from like, that's your soul line, right? Its attack is not particularly good, but it does let you get extra energy back from the discard, I suppose. But it's only 170 HP, you really don't want to do that. It has its own VMAX though, which is kind of neat. 320 HP, that's gigantic for a Ditto, by the way. Because Ditto is only 48 base HP and defenses in the, it's 48 and everything in the video games. So kind of fun to see that. For 3 colorless energy, this thing lets you just copy one of the opponent's actives attacks. Very good, actually, to be fair. If you have space in a regular, maybe like you could play this in a Snorlax deck or something. If you've got space, you could just go into this and copy the opponent's good thing if your other attacks aren't doing enough. It's triple acceleration compatible. It's compatible with like all of the good colorless energy stuff we have at the moment. Yeah, it's fine. You just need to have your own attack that works as well and behind it. It's pretty good. The evolutions all have this awakening ability, Incandescent, Thunderous Torrential for their stuff. They all do like minuscule damage basically for the stuff. It's all about the ability here. If it has a memory capsule attached, the Pokemon it's normally super effective against, that type doesn't have abilities. So for Vaporeon, fire types, for Jolteon, water types, that's very important later, and for Flareon, grass types, which, come on, grass types didn't need any more hate against them. Flareon's not particularly good. Vaporeon, I think, is maybe okay sometimes. Right now, probably the best fire deck is Centiskorch, and that doesn't even have abilities, so this one probably isn't super good either. But the Jolteon is amazing because it hits Inteleon, and later on the Inteleon engine actually picks up something fierce. From next set, I think we could start playing it better. Like, it's good at the moment, but I think it's even better with Level Ball, obviously. This can shut down that, so you actually do see this teched into some decks later on. I think particularly Arceus was one, because it has a bad time against Rapid Strike, and they played Inteleon, so yeah. Snorlax is insane. We've enjoyed this one already. If it's in the active spot, you can draw until you have 7 cards in your hand and end your turn. Doesn't sound too great, but considering you can play down your hand pretty severely in this this meta, and it also only gives up 1 prize, it's pretty good. It's kind of like the old Cleffa sort of thing, right? Where it's like shuffle draw 7. This just does it on an ability instead, which is good because it means you don't have to dedicate energy. And yeah, it's pretty good, pretty bulky. I like it. Zapdos is interesting. It's only 110 HP, but then the last Zapdos also was, so kind of whatever. For 2 lightning and a colorless, the main attack here discards all energy on this thing, and Thunder Snipe does 160 to a benched V or GX Pokemon. If you put the telescopic sight on this, you could KO Crobats and Eldegoss as well, which is pretty good. As a baseline, it KOs Dedenne, and Dedenne still sees play alongside Crobat because they're mutually hard once per turns, so it still has some targets. It's pretty okay. Problem is accelerating to it, right? Because 2 lightning and the colorless is a lot to ask for. But if you can manage it, it's fine. It's pretty good. Donphan sees some play with Spiritomb in this set, to be honest. It's very similar to Donphan Prime. It even has heavy impact for the same amount of damage. This time I think it takes a twin energy as part of it this time instead of triple fighting. That's kind of funny. But yeah, it's got Earthquake and heavy impact and 150 HP. Functionally only 10 more than it used to have. God, Donphan Prime is broken. 120 damage with Earthquake, 20 to each of your bench Pokemon. This is used with the Spiritomb to power up that Grudge attack. I forget exactly what it's called, but it powers up its attack because it does damage based on its own damage counters. So yeah, It's obviously fighting type, hits a really good weakness, and it's all single energy attaching, so it's a pretty good one prize deck. Let's talk about a couple of amazing rares here. Obviously the artwork is kind of insane here, like I love the way it kind of comes out the border as well with the color stuff. Raikou is only 110 HP, 2 retreat, and it does 120 and 120 snipe as well. The obvious problem is it costs a grass, a lightning, and a metal energy, which is completely impossible right now, but once again, Lost Zone Engine lets this happen with Mirage Gate pretty easily, so good card later on, good version of the deck. Celebi is the one that actually saw some play because of Energy Press, actually, not because of Amazing Bloom. This was used by Tord to specifically counter Dark decks in his Rapid Strike Urshifu, I believe, so that was kind of fun. 30 for each energy attached to the opponent's active. It's not super huge, but it gets enough damage done when you have a bunch of energy on these Dark Pokemon. Amazing Bloom, if you had a Lightning and a Psychic energy, lets you evolve each of your bench Pokemon, kind of like the Leafeon's GX attack from before. Not really possible to charge that up, unfortunately, but it's pretty fun nonetheless. There's a Celebi in one of the side sets, I think it was Shining Fates, that looks at the top 6 cards of your deck if it's active, and reveals any energy that you find there to go into your hand. So, there's a couple of these. There's a Manaphy that we'll talk about later on as well, and then in Celebrations there's the Mew, which is the most popular one, but we need to get to Celebrations first. There's an Obstagoon here as well, which is pretty good. I mean, all the Obstagoons kind of read insane, except like one promo one or something. If this is anywhere on your board, you can just make the opponent discard until they have 4 cards in hand. So really good against the Snorlax, funnily enough. Knuckle Impact, Triple Acceleration Energy, 180, kind of solid. Can't attack next turn, but who really cares? That's a good amount of damage on a single prizer, but it is a stage 2, so yeah. A little bit awkward, unfortunately. Shiftry is very funny, it's not very good, mostly because that retreat cost is so atrocious that you can't get it back out the active, but if this is in the active spot, every supporter card the opponent plays is a rival. It just draws 3 cards, right? Fan Tornado doesn't do nearly enough, so nobody really cares. Just a funny card. Wailord V, speaking of funny cards, 280 HP 2 prizer. I think that's the biggest they ever get to. Even Blissy's only 250, so that's kind of ridiculous. V-Stars now have that sort of thing in their stage 1 effectively. It's not particularly good, but it could be used with Glimwood Tangle, I suppose, to be very funny. For 4 water energy, you flip 3 coins and do 120 for each heads. If you can consistently get 2 heads on this thing, 240 is pretty good, even for that amount of energy, considering this can have Cape of Toughness or buff padding on it to get to 330 HP. Like, good lord. Hyper Potion maybe on the thing. Draw Up is also interesting if you could get energy into the discard on your first turn going second. Attach up to 3 water energy from your discard to it for a single water is pretty good. Yeah, it's a very funny card. Not necessarily very good, but we could do some dumb stuff with this in Frostmoth, I think. Altaria is stage 1 that has the same ability as the Decidueye from before, prevents the all damage done to it by V and GX Pokemon, which is really silly. Speed Dive only does 60, but it's like, we only just got a stage 2 of this, why are we getting a stage 1 now? I don't know. It doesn't really see much play compared to the Decidueye though, so yeah, it's kind of weird. Dusknoir is an interesting card, as it usually is. This is the Crystal, I believe Crystal Beach was the stadium card that did this. Light Dragonite was the first example of it. All special energy on both Pokemon, unlike all Pokemon, are colorless and have no other effect. The modern day equivalent of this is the Temple of Sinnoh, right? Which is also very interesting. Yeah, it's a current stadium card, so kind of fun. Unfortunately, being the stage 2 makes this a bit unplayable, but at the very least we have a Duskull that can evolve into Dusknoir from the deck by discarding 3 cards, so you can speed it up a little bit. I don't know. More amazing rares. Kyogre is fine. It's very, very expensive though. 120 HP, and even for Lost Box this is going to take a fair bit. Water, Lightning, Metal, colorless. But it does 80 to each of the opponent's Pokemon. That's ridiculous, right? Mew is not really seeing that much play at the moment, so if you could somehow get it charged, yeah, it would be great. but Rainbow Brush unfortunately rotated, so I don't think there's any realistic way of doing it. But it would be very, very funny if you could. Rayquaza makes a very good Lost Box deck later on. It actually does still take an insane amount of energy to do its thing, but it does a ridiculous amount of damage, as you would expect a Rayquaza to do. Again, 120 HP, that seems to be the sort of baseline for most of the amazing rares. For a Grass, a Lightning, and a Fighting, you discard all the basic energy from this thing, and do 80 for each different type you discarded. This is capable of one-shotting everything that you would want with like 4 or 5 energy. So in Lost Box, because they play Psychic as well, and probably Water Energy for the Greninja, right? You have like 5 different types you could play most of the time, and yeah, you can scale it to whatever damage you need. It's pretty good. Jirachi is not really used for its attack, though honestly, that attack is busted. It's just like, how do you get a Psychic, a Fighting, and a Metal Energy on this thing? But it's actually sometimes used because of Dreamy Revelation. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into the hand and put the other one back on top of the deck. I use this as a one-of in the Colossal deck that we'll have this time round, because you can use it with Rotom Phone, right? Either before or after the Revelation. If you use it before, then you can guarantee the card that you want to get. But if you use it after, then you can, if you use the Rotom Phone after the Revelation, you still look 4 cards deeper into the deck, but it means you can shuffle away the card that you didn't want, so that's kind of neat. It has to be active though, which is a bit of a problem for it, but I mean, that's kind of just like a different version of the current Jirachi, right? Lets you get any card too, so that's kind of fun. Manaphy, like I mentioned with the Celebi, is another version of it here. This looks at the top 6 and finds a Pokemon there, puts it into the hand, so probably a little bit more useful overall than finding the energy. We do have search for the energy cards after all, so yeah, Piers, for example, is pretty good at doing that. So yeah, this is pretty solid. I mean, obviously Pokemon search is always good, right? So I like it. There's a Whimsicott in here which is very funny. Flying Fury lets you do 10 plus 40 for each tool that you discard from your board for a single Psychic Energy. This is very similar to the Gourgeist that we had before, but instead of needing twin energy, it uses a single Psychic, which is pretty cool. Maybe with Level Ball you could see this played, because Psychic is a pretty good type to be next set, but right now it's kind of annoying. The main use for this would be U-turn board, being able to put all the U-turn board back into the hand instead of discarding them, but then that really just reads, please Marnie me, for the love of God Marnie me, right? So yeah, unfortunately we lost a Rotom that synergized with this. You could still use the Ninetales, but like Ninetales is terrible, so we don't really care about that. Darmanitan actually gets a V and a VMAX here. The V is nothing really to speak about. You might get a Paralysis Flip with Freezing Headbutt. Frozen Slice is like an okay amount of damage, but self-damage is pretty bad for this thing. The VMAX somehow only has 320 HP, like it's almost as frail as Pikachu. It's really silly. But for 4 Water Energy, you do 230 spread to each of the opponent's bench, which is pretty good. Decent, use with Frostmoth. Water types are in a very difficult position in a way though, because Metal is just so insane right now, but Lightning is also still pretty strong. Like, Pikarom might not be as good as it was, but it still represented an awful lot, so it's difficult to actually play water types right now, and this one being weak to Zacian definitely does not help its case. Tornadus is cool. It's probably never going to see play, but Jet Draft is like the Derail from the Yveltal, but for any energy, which is kind of neat. 30 and discard a special from this thing. The Air Slash doesn't really matter too much, but I guess you could use Flying EMZ with this. That's pretty funny, right? Get a Z move on this thing. I don't know, it's not very good. Another amazing rare, and I think the last one that I'm actually going to talk about here, because Zacian and Zamazenta... No, there's one more. Zacian and Zamazenta are really bad, but there's one more to talk about. Reshiram probably reads the craziest out of them. It does 270 for a Fire, a Lightning, and a Dark, but it also does 60 to itself. Man, if only we had Protection Cube, right? 60 to yourself obviously means you basically KO yourself after 2 turns, which is not great, but 270 is a huge amount and is enough with like 1 damage mod to KO V-stars and stuff later on. So it would be an interesting version of Lost Box. It's not good enough, I don't think, though. At least not personally. Zekrom does see some play later on as an anti-Palkia and Lugia sort of thing. For 2 lightning and the colorless, this 130 HP single prizer does 130 damage, does do 60 to itself, which is not great, but it also paralyzes the opponent's active as well. That's pretty good. You just need to be able to accelerate to it a little bit in order to get that attack cost off, because it is a bit expensive, but auto paralysis is a very, very strong effect to have. And when 2 of the biggest decks in the format are weak to lightning, this is something that's worth noting. There is also some healing stuff that you can do later on in order to mitigate the problems of like killing yourself, basically. So yeah. Talonflame V is interesting because it can use its first attack going first. For a single colorless energy, it discards your hand and draws 6 cards. It's also weak to lightning and resistant to fighting. Despite being a fire type, this is one of the very, very few examples of a Gen 8 Pokemon which is using its alternate typing. Crazy to think about, I know. Universally, everything this should be water weak, right? Because it's being treated as a fire type. Its attack is like not great. 2 fire and a colorless to do 160 discard and energy from this thing. It's probably fine in a welder deck, to be honest, but 190 HP is pretty frail. The nice thing about this is it's 0 retreat though, so it's not a bad starter, to be honest. This is something I would consider if I was running a dedicated go first deck. So yeah, because it's not too difficult to search, and you have like an easy retreat option with it as well, so it's pretty good. Aegislash has some interest to me here. I think the regular V actually saw some play in Zacian decks because Sonic Edge is a thing. The VMAX doesn't really see play, but I think it's interesting, so there is that. 2 metal and the colors to do 130 and shred through any effects on the opponent's active. If you go against the Decidueye or the Obstagoon, like they tend to get played together. But if you go across that deck with a Zacian deck, you don't really have any good outs to it, so this is one of the best ways through. So yeah, the VMAX itself goes up to 320 HP and does 160 for that same energy cost, but it does 30 more for each prize you've taken, so the more you get into the game, the better it gets. So that's kind of neat. I like it. I don't think it's amazing, but with like 3 prizes taken, this is doing 250, which is quite a lot. So yeah, it's reasonable. KO or VMAX, do a ton of damage. Xerneas is a control style card for a single psychic energy, 130 HP on this dude, single prizes, so that's kind of neat. Puts a card from your discard pile into the hand. That's literally all it's good for, but that is still pretty solid, and in a control style deck, that's the kind of attack you probably want to look for. It's like Junk Hunt's only 1 card, but it gets any card you want, so that's kind of fun. Yveltal is the last of the amazing rares we'll talk about here, and this one did see play in Lugia, not in Lost Box, because special energy from this format is kind of insane, right? As I have noted before, they always provide the type that they are associated with, but you can only gain the secondary effects of them if you share the type of the card. However, when your entire deck is based on accelerating special energy, it doesn't matter that you don't get the extra effects off them. You can still accelerate like a Heat Fire and a Horror Psychic to this thing. You just don't get the secondary effects. Anyway, for a Fire, a Psychic, a Dark, and a Twin Energy, or double colorless, depending on your disposition, auto KO the opponent's active. Amazing Destruction is right. Obviously, it is nigh on impossible to properly charge this right now, but if you could do it, automatically KOing the opponent is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, Lugia can do this in 1 turn if you play double turbo plus the special energies of the different types here, so this is one of the crazy variants of it before rotation kicks in, so expect to see it later, basically. Incineroar is not very good, but is kind of a cool artwork, so I wanted to note it anyway. This is in one of the side sets here. Grand Flame for 2 fire and a colorless does 90 and accelerates 2 fire from the discard to 1 you've benched. We have used this kind of attack in the past, but and it was the primary attack too. It was on Terrakion. But the problem is it was a really good typing, and nowadays this just doesn't do nearly enough, I don't think. Also, I have beef with this card because I know Flare Blitz in the TCG is a different attack because it discards all your fire energy attached, but Flare Blitzer, really? They had to do that in order to have its recoil attack on it here? Gross. It takes too much energy for that. Like, this could be kind of cool, but we lost Fiery Flint, which means it's harder to get the energy, like, that quickly out of the deck now. Because Giant Half is good, but then we really need the follow-up for it too. So I don't think it's super good anymore, because you need Welder plus Attach plus 2 in the discard, and even then it's not that impressive. Dhelmise VMAX evolves from the same Dhelmise V that we had from Sword and Shield base set, so I'm not going over that one again. Free 30 HP, pretty bulky. Swinging Chain is kind of neat with Rillaboom. This lets you do 30 to one of the opponent's Pokemon for each grass energy that is on this Pokemon. So, pretty good snipe move. It does take a lot of energy to get a huge amount of damage out of it, but even if you're just like sniping 90 or something, that's still pretty impressive. And despite the second attack not discarding energy, you might well need to do that snipe attack on the second turn, because for 2 grass and a colorless this does 240, but it can't use that attack next turn. I think overall Rillaboom VMAX is still better, but this gives you more diverse options, and the Dhelmise V isn't terrible either. It does like 200 for the same free energy cost, so I think there's something you could do with it here if you really wanted to. It's just like, do you play this or do you play Rillaboom? Because you probably can't play both. Maybe you could, but I don't know, it seems a bit sketch. There's a new Thwacky from the Champion's Path set, I think it was. It was one of the two. It's only got 90 HP, but that would work better for Level Ball if you wanted to do that later. And if there's a Stadium in play on your side, this Pokemon has no retreat cost. Probably better than the 100 HP 2 retreat thing that we had before if you do get stuck with it. So it's worth noting anyway, you're not always going to be able to use Roweggs to accelerate through. So, yeah. Orbeetle is the other... both of the next 2 sets of cards are the ones I'm interested in for this round. Orbeetle is pretty reasonable. It's got 1 retreat for both of its things, 180 into 310 HP, so it's a bit on the frail side, but it only takes 2 energy to attack, which is pretty good. Strafe lets you do 20 and switch this to the bench if you want to. Fine for the early game, I suppose, but you really want to Gormandize in the early game, so that's whatever. And then both of them have this mysterious wave attack. Well, G-Max wave for the VMAX. It does 50, and then 30 on the regular V, 50 on the VMAX for each energy that the opponent has on their active. So it's a Psychic style attack, basically. Reasonable, it's not going to do a ton of damage all the time, and it's not very good to Eternatus, but it does enough, I think. And the VMAX is where it gets really cool, because Eerie Beam, if this switches from bench to... It doesn't even have to switch, actually. I completely thought it was like, switch it and then do the thing. No, if this is in the active spot, you may just put the damage counter on each of the opponent's Pokemon. I have to remember that when I play this in the actual thing, because I thought it had to switch from bench to active. No. This just gets to do it at the start of the turn too, which is pretty great. Put the 1 damage counter on all of the opponent's Pokemon can be really nasty, and it adds up quite quickly. So, yeah, quite strong card. The Colossal isn't nearly as good in its regular form, so I'm not even really going to talk about it. Its attacks are too expensive, there's no acceleration for it at the moment that makes sense. You could play regular Colossal with this too, but it's just not nearly strong enough for that. The VMAX, on the other hand, does have some potential. It's not the strongest card out there, but it can work because of its Eruption Shot attack here. For 1 fighting energy, you do 40, but if you then have to discard the top card of your deck regardless. But if that is an energy card, this does 130, and you attach that energy to this Pokemon. This is really good for accelerating the stone fighting energy, and you need to accelerate because for 3 fighting and a colorless energy over here, G-Max Boulder does 240 damage. It's respectable, and this sort of 2-shot thing can happen with the with Pokemon V, but yeah, it's a lot of energy when you don't have a regular accelerator. I think the idea is you're supposed to use this with Colossal in order to accelerate a fire and a fighting to this thing, but that's just too much deck space, I think. It works better as a turbo deck that uses Oranguru to top deck energy from your hand in order to get it that way, I think. So, yeah. Cramorant VMAX, the reason we are adding Shining Fates into this set, to be honest, evolves from the Cramorant V that we had before, so I'm not going to talk about that, but for 3 colorless energy, you flip a coin for each energy on this Pokemon, 80 damage per heads. This is the Blissey from way back, I forget exactly what set now, Lost Thunder maybe, and it's that, but on a free prizer, 320 HP instead of 160. Glimwood Tangle is in format, so Funny Bird can do funny flip things. Use this with Porygon Z, get all the busted colorless energy stuff going at the moment. It's very silly. Alcremie is used later on with Shadow Rider Calyrex as the main thing, because we need acceleration for this to work. I don't think the basic is worth noting. It's only 170 HP, which kind of sucks, but the VMAX is kind of intriguing, 310 HP. Has a couple of attacks, I guess, so it is sort of worth noting both of them. Adornment is interesting. For each of your bench Pokemon, search your deck for a Psychic Energy, attach it to that Pokemon. It works with its second attack, because the second attack discards energy from anywhere. Discard any amount of energy from your Pokemon for 2 Psychic Energy, do 60 per card you discarded this way. You really need to be able to accelerate with this, and we did just lose Malamar, which sucks for this thing, because I think Malamar would have actually been a pretty solid deck with this. You need to accelerate 3 energy a turn, but it's still, like, yeah, triple Malamar is possible, so it could have been pretty cool. Later on, we get Shadow Rider though, and that will work quite nicely with this. We get Snarl on the bench, the best, objectively the best Snarl art we ever get, in my opinion. It calls for family. It's actually worth noting more than just for the artwork. It's better Snarl than the one we have at the moment. Search your deck for a basic, put it onto the bench for a single water is pretty good in the decks that you would play it in, so yeah, worth noting anyway. The Duraludon V over here isn't very good at the moment, although you could certainly try it. But it's worth noting because despite not being single strike Duraludon, it is used with the Duraludon VMAX in Arcdura decks later on. It's 220 HP and it takes 30 less from attacks, so objectively it's the highest like tanking capability of a Duraludon, so that's why it gets played. Gatling Slug is curious at least. 10 plus 40 for each metal energy that's on this thing, 3 colorless energy is the base cost here. Unfortunately, metal acceleration is not that strong right now, and it's only 130 for its base cost. That's really bad. Like, we had better output than this from Secret Sword in the from the Keldeo recently, so yeah, it's just not great, to be honest. Too bad though. But yeah, its tanking capability is why it gets played. Finally, Zarude V is returned to Mega Sceptile, actually. It's kind of interesting. Bind Down is a curious attack, I suppose. 50 for double colorless and the opponent can't retreat next turn. That's fun, but Jungle Rising is why you would use this. For 2 grass energy, you can attach up to 2 basic energy from your hand to your bench Pokemon, and if you do, fully heal any Pokemon that you attach to. So the same thing as Mega Sceptile, except now it's for any energy, but I think realistically you're only going to play this in a grass deck because of the cost of this card. It's kind of cool. I don't know what you would play it in, because Rillaboom just kind of does the grass acceleration thing best, I think, but I like it. It's neat. Funny monkey. And that is that. I think somehow we ended up speaking about this one just about as long as Darkness Ablaze, but hey, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. It's just most of it's not meta, for sure. Like, none of this is really beating Eternatus frequently. None of this is truly beating, like, the Pikarom, there's Zacian. I think Zacian Luke Metal is the one that gets played now, Lucario Melmetal. So, like, I don't think much of this is really beating that either consistently. You know, they have favorable matchups here and there. Obviously Charizard would do pretty well into the Zacian decks, probably does really badly into the Eternatus though. Colossal does good into Eternatus and Pikarom, but does really bad into the grass decks. Rillaboom was a deck that got played a bit around here, and of course there's more than just Rillaboom as grass attackers you could use. And like most of these do pretty badly into Decidueye actually. So kind of funny that that deck is actually a thing as well. So yeah, it's a fun set. There's a fair few things for the future in here, but it's still cool to talk about anyway. Lots of interesting stuff going on here. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have found this interesting. And until next time, when we struggle our way through a couple of battles here, I guess. We're not especially looking forward to this one, but I guess there's still some neat stuff to look at. So yeah, till then, take care.